Hello, my name is Rickard, and in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to put together this composite in Photoshop. This composite is part of my Photoshop Secrets course, and right now I'm offering it for free, so if you follow the link in the description of this video, you can download the course, which includes all the assets, images, and brushes that I use in the tutorial itself. So you can go ahead, download that, and then follow along step by step. Let's get started.
All right, the first thing we're going to do is create a new file. So to do that, I'm going to go up to File, New. And if you look on the right here, you can see what the shortcut is for each of these commands. And as a general rule, try to learn these shortcuts and use them the next time you go to this menu item. All right, so this is the new document dialog, and I want let's just go to one of these so that it's on some kind of default, because this is more likely what you'll see to begin with. So on the width, I'm going to change inches to pixels. I'm going to make the width 2000 pixels and the height 3000 pixels. And I want the resolution to be 72. So that's 72 pixels per inch. I want the color mode to be RGB. I want it to be 8-bit. I'm going to switch the background to black. And then I want the color space to be Adobe RGB. And I want square pixels. So those are all my settings. Next, I'm going to hit create. All right, now I want some guides so that as I place items, you'll better be able to see where I'm placing them. So let's go to View, New Guide Layout. And if this is on the default, it'll look something like this. What I want to do is I want to change the columns to 2 and get rid of the gutter. And I want the rows to be 5 with no gutter. So just like that, I want it to clear existing guides. And let's hit OK. Now to turn the guides on and off after you've placed them, you can do Command semicolon. So that'll toggle the guides on and off as you're working. Okay, next let's go to File, Place Embedded, and in the tutorial assets for the orb, you're going to see this image here, Mitchell Hartley from Unsplash. So let's go ahead and place that. Hit OK. And you'll notice that it placed it perfectly. That's only because the document that I created and this image have exactly the same 2:3 ratio. If it didn't, it would place it and maybe have a little room at the top and the bottom, or a little room on the left and the right. Okay, you'll see this little icon here at the bottom. You'll notice that this layer does not have it. That little icon indicates that this is an embedded object. So if I want to get rid of that and actually make this inside my document, kind of rasterize it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go on the layer itself, and then right mouse click and go to rasterize layer. And there you can see now that layer does not have that little icon there anymore. All right, next thing I want to do is I want to cut her out of the background. Now I don't need the guides for this, so I'm going to go ahead and turn them off with Command semicolon. And I'm going to go to my quick selection tool, and up at the top here you can see select subject. So let's go ahead and click on that, and you can see it's done a halfway decent job of selecting her, but it didn't select our rock. So we're going to have to select that by hand. Now by holding Command and the space bar and then dragging left and right, I can zoom. And then by just holding the space bar, I can pan the image around. So those are very handy shortcuts to know. Space bar for the hand, space bar and Command for the magnifying glass or the zoom. All right, so with my quick selection tool selected, make sure that you're on the add to selection option here, and then just start dragging, clicking and dragging across the area that has these rocks. Now, with the quick selection tool, it's a good idea to let go of your mouse and start a new selection a few times, so that if the selection accidentally does something like this, you can do Command Z without losing your previous work. And by holding Option, I can switch to the minus from selection and get rid of anything that was over selected here. Good, so that's done a pretty good job. I will have to go and clean up the hair. So let's do that next. And for that, I'm going to use the Select and Mask. And that's going to put me into the Select and Mask dialog. So this is kind of its own workspace inside Photoshop that helps you make better selections. So in this case, the top tool here is the same as your quick selection tool. This is a refine edge tool. And what this does is if you paint it between the area that's selected and, the area that's selected and this red area that's not selected, what it'll do is it'll try to contextually work out what should and should not be in the selection based on the information it already has. So if I paint over these hairs here with the refine edge, Photoshop should be able to figure out that I want the hair selected and not the background. So there you can see it's done a pretty good job of selecting that out. You can see the hints of pink in the face, and that means that it hasn't fully selected the face there. It's kind of perceived that some of those hairs or some of that cheek is background. So I could go to my Add to Selection tool here and see if that'll fix it, but oftentimes it'll start selecting the background. So what you may want to do is do it manually, and that's where this brush comes in. So with this brush, basically you're just painting, either adding to the selection or detracting from the selection. So for example here, if I'm paint, that's been added to the selection. If I hold down Option, this area has been removed from my selection. All right, so with that done, I'm going to turn on Smart Radius and click that up to about 2 pixels. And what that's going to do is similar to the Refine Edge, it's going to look at the selected area and unselected area and see if it can move that selection closer to the pixels that it thinks you wanted to select. All right, so next we're going to hit OK, and that's going to transfer our information into a selection here. You can see the running ants. That indicates an area in your layer that's been selected. All right, so what I want to do is I want to turn this selection into its own layer. So to do that, I'm going to go to Layer, New, Layer via Copy, and the shortcut for that is Command J. That's a shortcut you're going to use a lot. So from this point forward, I'm just going to use the shortcut. So let's do Command J, and there you can see I now have a new layer with just the woman and without the background. So let's call this layer Original. I'm doing that by just double clicking on the layer name. We'll call this one Woman. And then back to my original layer, I'm going to go File, Place Embedded, and I want to select the second image in the Assets folder here. And this is going to be our background. And as you can see here, it did not place this correctly, so we're just going to place it manually. So you can see there's this darker mountain in the foreground here. I actually don't want to see that, so I'm going to move that till I don't see it anymore. And then you'll notice this little anchor point here. And if you don't notice it, just turn this little check mark on. And this little anchor point, if you move it, so for example, I know that this is where I want it to be. So if I move my anchor point to there and then hold down Option and drag here, it's going to scale it to that anchor point. So that's really helpful when you're compositing, to have the ability to move that anchor point and then scale or rotate from a point that you adjudicate. All right, so let's click on the check mark or double click. That's going to place. And there you can see we now have our basic compositing going on with the original image and a new background. Next, I want to create a kind of orb up here. So I'm going to go File, New, and I'm actually going to create a new document here. That's 1000 by 1000 pixels. And in here, I'm going to do File, Place Embedded, and you're going to see a Nucly concrete. I'm going to place that, then hold down Option, just drag that until it's to the top and the bottom. Then I'm going to drag it to the left here, so I just have this half of it. Now, the information is actually still here. So if I drag this, you'll notice that all that information is there. It hasn't actually cropped it out. And when I apply my distort filter, I don't want this extra information here. So I can fix that in two ways. I can rasterize this and then crop my image. So let's go ahead and do it that way. Rasterize layer, and then go to my crop tool, reset the crop, and then make sure this delete cropped pixels is turned on, and then just hit the enter button. So now when I drag this out, you can see it's cut off those pixels. Another way to do it, if we just go back in our history here, and the history allows you to do multiple undos, is to make a selection like this and then do Command J. And if I throw this one away, you can now see that this layer, again, doesn't have that information there. So let's undo, which is Command Z. And the next thing I want to do is I want to spherize this. So let's go to Filter, Distort, Spherize. And we want the amount to be 100, the mode to be normal. Let's hit OK. There you can see it's turned this into a ball. So now we're going to select that ball. So let's go to our elliptical marquee tool. And I want to change the style from normal to fixed size. And I want the fixed size to be 1000 pixels by 1000 pixels. And then I can just click and it'll make the selection, and I can drag it. And with my smart guides turned on, which are here, smart guides under view, you can see as I drag this to the center, those pink lines indicate that my selection is in the center. All right, so with my circle selected, I'm going to do Command J. As you can see here, I now have this ball, and that's going to turn into our orb. So let's go ahead and just drag this in here. I'm going to now turn on my guides, and I want it to be kind of between these two lines. So somewhere right about there. And I want this corner to be right about there. So I think this is a pretty good place for it right here. All right, and then next I want to add some birds in here, and then we'll start making all these elements integrate together. So let's do File, Open, and you're going to see the 3 birds flying. Here you can see that we've got 3 birds, and I want to cut these out of the background. Now, you'll notice that there's already a really good distinction between the background and our birds. So what I can do is I can basically just take this, make a copy of the layer. I could do that with Command J as well, and then do Command M, or Image Adjustments Curves, Command M. And you'll notice in our histogram here, there's information in the highlights and a little information in the darks. And basically this entire middle here has no information. So if I take the bottom of my curve, just bring it toward the middle there, it's going to take my dark birds and basically make them fully black. And if I drag this and past this part of the histogram, you'll notice that my background is fully white. And then I can take this and turn it into a mask. So to do that, I'm going to go to channels, hold down Command on the keyboard, and click on the RGB channel thumbnail. There you can see it's made a selection of everything that's white. I can now go select inverse, go to my original layer, and then do Command J. And now if I turn off my background, you'll see I have those birds as a selection. And I'm going to take this layer and just drag it into here. You can see my birds are now in there, and I'm going to convert them into a smart object. And you can see now that has the little icon. And what that allows me to do is if I scale it down, I'm not losing any pixel information. And if I decide to scale this back up with Command T for transform, you'll notice that I haven't lost that pixel information. So that's the advantage of smart objects, as well as the fact that you can make multiple copies of them and then change the smart object, and that change will apply to all your copies. So in this case, I want first set of birds. And to bring up this transform box, I'm doing Command T. If you prefer, you can also show the transform controls here, and that'll leave that transform box always apparent on whatever layer you have selected. To me, that's far too distracting. So I'm going to turn it off, and whenever I do want to do a scale or a rotate, I'll do Command T on my keyboard, and that'll initiate the transform. So the first set of birds will be there, and then by holding down Option and just dragging, that'll make a copy of the layer. I'm going to make this one a bit bigger. And then finally, I want one that just has this bird. So I'm going to, again, Option drag, move my anchor point to that bird, make them larger, maybe rotate them a bit. And then I'm going to add a mask so that just that bird is showing. So I can go into any of my selection tools here. I can do a rectangular marquee, go around that one bird, and then add a mask using the add mask icon. And the white is what's revealed, and the black is basically hiding the rest of that layer. So there you go, I have those in place. Now we're going to do some work to get all these elements integrated and also create kind of an eclipse behind this planet or this orb. So first, let's change our layer name to orb. And I'm going to use some layer effects to create the illusion that this is actually an orb, not a circle. So to do that, I'm going to go to Gradient Overlay. Well, not Pattern Overlay, Gradient Overlay. There you go. And we're going to go open up the Basic tab here. You'll see a black and white, so I'm going to select that. And I want to put this on Multiply. So there you can see it's almost the right effect, but this is a linear gradient. Let's switch it to a radial gradient. And there you can see, I'm going to reverse it here. And now you can see I have this nice highlight. And what I can do is just click and drag where I want that to be. So I want it to be right up at the top here. I'm just going to make it bigger, like that, and then take down the opacity just a bit so I still have some detail showing down here. Well, 69 looks good. All right, now I want another gradient overlay that just adds a little bit more highlight up here. So let's make a copy of this. And in my copy, I'm going to change the blending mode to screen. There you can see it's made it light. Now I want the scale to come down, so it's just a small highlight. So maybe right about there. And then I want to take the opacity down so it's not so obvious. So something like that. All right, and then the last thing I want to do is I want to add some atmosphere over the whole thing. Based on how far it is, such as these mountains in the background, you'll notice that the mountains never go to black. They go to kind of a dark blue color. So I'm going to turn on the color overlay here. We're going to change that to this dark blue color and put it on screen. And what that's going to do is it's going to put that kind of bluish color over the whole thing. Now I can take it down if I think it's too strong. It's probably somewhere around 70 looks good. So let's hit OK. All right, next I want the sliver of our sun or our light source behind it. So to make a selection out of an existing layer, what I can do is hold down Command and just click on the layer thumbnail, and that's going to select the transparency of that layer. Now I can make a new layer, clicking on the new layer icon, and we can fill this with white. So let's make sure white is our foreground color. We can go Edit, Fill, and Fill with foreground color. And the shortcut for this is Option, Delete, or Alt Backspace on a PC. And let's deselect, that's Command D. And with my keyboard keys up and down, I'm just going to move this so it's right about there. So we just have a sliver of it showing here. Okay, so next we're going to make this sliver glow. So the first thing I want to do is select my orb again. I'm going to do Command, click on the thumbnail. Then I'm going to invert this selection so it's selecting everything outside of the circle. And with my layer 3 selected, I'm going to do Command J. What that's going to do is if we isolate that layer by holding Option or Alt and clicking on the eyeball, you can see my white sliver here. That is what I have left of that layer. And we're going to call this Glow. We can call this Backlight. Or sun, I guess. All right, and the glow I want to put above the orb, and essentially what we're going to do is we're going to blur it numerous times so we get a fall off pattern. So it's bright, and then as it becomes farther away from the source of the light, it falls off. So to do that, I'm going to make a copy of the glow, and we're going to call this one 400. If I go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, I want to set the radius to 400. Now that you're not even going to be able to see because it's so blurred. And basically now what we're going to do is repeat this step and each time cut our blur amount by a half. So I'm going to make another copy of this and we're going to make this one 200. Go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, make that 200. Now if you find yourself repeating an action constantly or going to the menu regularly, I highly recommend creating a shortcut. I'm all about shortcuts because it dramatically increases your efficiency. So for example here I can do Command J, but I have to go to my menu to get to the Gaussian Blur. So let me show you real quick how you can change that. So let's go to Edit, Keyboard Shortcuts, and we're going to go to Filter. We're going to find our Gaussian Blur. So here it is, and if I click here, you can see there's no shortcut, but I want to do Shift Option Command G. And it appears that that is not assigned to anything currently, so I can just hit Accept, hit OK, and now with this, if I change this to 100 here, I go Shift Option Command G, and voila, this will make my life a lot faster. Command J, 50, Command J, G, 25. Let's keep naming these. Command J, Shift Option Command G. I'll make this one 12. And same thing, Command J, Shift Option Command G, 6. And last one, Command J, Shift Option, Command G, and 3. Okay, next I want to take everything from 12 to 400 and I want to merge these. So I can go here and you'll see merge layers is Command E. So that's all merged, and we'll call this Big Glow. And then we can merge 6 and 3 and the glow, and we can call these Small Glow. And with the Big Glow layer, I want to change the blending mode to screen, and then I want to do Image, Adjustments, Hue Saturation, which is Command U. We're going to colorize, change the saturation to 100 and the lightness to -50. And then we're just going to adjust this. Kind of want a warm orangey color, so something right about there looks good. Let's hit OK. And let's try Command J. Probably don't want it quite that bright, but maybe 50%. And I'm pretty happy with that. All right, next I want to add a flare here. So let's go to File, Place Embedded. We're going to use Flare 19. I'm just going to expand that out like this. Place that right about there. And then put this on screen. And that's pretty nice right there. Now, I don't like these sharp lines. So what I'm going to do is first, I'm just going to rasterize this layer because I don't need it to be a smart object. Then I'm going to use my Gaussian Blur shortcut, Shift Option Command G. And let's just increase this until those lines disappear. And that looks like around 5 pixels is going to do the trick. Let's hit OK. And then I'm also going to add a gradient, or sorry, a mask here. Go in my gradient tool, make sure black is my foreground color, make sure I'm on a linear gradient, and make sure I'm on foreground to transparent under the basics. And then holding down Shift, I'm just going to move up this way, and this way. Just like that. So kind of containing that flare just a little bit more. Okay, next, what I want to do is on the woman, I want her to have kind of a bright light that's hitting her coming from here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a copy of this layer. And we're going to call this light or bright or highlights. Let's call it highlights because we're going to use it for the highlights. And let's turn off our guides. I'm going to do Command O, that'll fit everything into the view. And what I'm going to do is go to my curve. So Command M for curve. I'm going to make it brighter. Keep the darks about the same. I don't really want to adjust those much. And I also want them to be a little warmer. So I'm going to add red to the highlights. And move the blue down, which is going to get me more toward yellow. And a tiny bit on the green as well. So something like that. And then I'm going to put this on overlay. Now you'll notice that the overlay made all my darks a lot darker if I turn this on and off. But it has the correct effect on the highlights. So essentially what I want now is I want this layer on overlay to only affect my highlights. And the best way to make that happen is to double click on your layer over here. That'll bring up your layer style, and then go to the blend if. And what this allows you to do is it allows you to blend your layer on top of the layer below it, or the layers below it, based on the luminance of your image or the luminance of your background. In this case, I want it to be based on, well, in this case actually, they're about the same because it's the same image, but Let's go ahead and base it on the illuminance of the top layer. And what I'm going to do is I don't want it to affect the dark. So if I take this and drag it, you can see that my darks are going back to how they were. But you can also see that there's this strong clipping. So let's move this to about the middle. And then holding down Option, I'm going to split this. And what this does is it essentially creates a feather between the spot where it's being applied and where it's not being applied. And it gives you a lot of control on how these two images blend. So I'm pretty happy with that. If we turn this on and off, you can see it's really just affecting the highlights. And I'm thinking that looks pretty nice. The next thing I want to do is add just a little bit of kind of atmosphere or smoke around where this guy is. So to do that, we need to load some brushes. So let's go to our brush palette here. I'm going to click on this little icon here and go to Import Brushes. And under the assets for the tutorial, in your pack, you'll see Nucly compositing brushes. Go ahead and double click that. You'll now see a new folder here, Nucly compositing brushes. If I open that, you'll see the brushes. And the one I'm going to use for this is the Advanced Fog 02. I'm going to select that brush, go to under the orb, make a new layer. We can call this Atmosphere. I'm going to select, holding down Option with the brush tool, I'm going to select kind of a brightish yellow color. And I want this to be smaller. We're just going to hit it a few times like this. That just adds a little atmosphere, makes this look a little more realistic like that. Pretty happy with that. And we're also going to use this tool to put some atmosphere on top of our birds. So let's go ahead and take all of our birds and put them in their own folder. So I'm going to do Command G. We can call this birds. And then I'm going to add a layer, and I want this layer to only affect the birds. So to do that, I'm going to hold Option, go between the two layers, and link them like that. So what this is now doing is this layer will only affect the birds folder. So with my same atmosphere brush selected, I'm going to select this kind of background blue and just paint over these background birds. And then, so those should have the most atmosphere, and then let's cut this back to 50% for these ones that are a little closer to us. And then we'll leave this one at 100%. So that looks pretty good. I think these is a little too strong. So let's go to our eraser tool, set the opacity to maybe 10%. And then if I hold down Control and Option and drag left and right, I can change the diameter of my brush. And up and down will change the feather of the brush or the hardness of the brush. So because this is 10%, I'm only deleting a bit of the atmosphere at a time. So I'm pretty happy with that. And the next thing I want to do is add kind of a vignette over the whole thing. So I'm going to go to the very top here, and I'm going to go to my elliptical marquee tool, just put this back onto normal. If I hold down Option, it'll make my elliptical from the center, just about the size of our image like this. And then you'll notice that as I hover over the selection, my mouse changes. So with this, my mouse over the selection, I'm going to right mouse click and say transform selection. That's going to basically do a free transform on my selection independent of the layer. And let's hit OK. Then I'm going to go into quick mask mode. And what quick mask mode does is it takes your selection and puts it into a image, basically a pink and transparent image. Now the advantage of this is I can go into blur and actually blur my selection. And I want to blur this until I don't even see this edge anymore. So something around 385. I'm going to hit OK. And then if I go out of this, and the shortcut for this, by the way, is just Q on the keyboard. So Q will put you into the quick mask mode, and Q will take you out of it. So now I have the middle selection, but I actually want the outside selected. So I'm going to invert my selection and then add a curves adjustment layer. And I can just pull this down. You're going to notice that that gives me a nice vignette around the image. So we can call this curve vignette. And then I'm going to do one more curve, and this one I'm going to use to color grade the whole image. So let's go to blue, just raise up the bottom, and then pull down the top. We're also going to go into red, just bring up the center a tiny bit, and bring down the bottom, so kind of an S curve, like that. And I think maybe our vignette, let's put our vignette on top. See if that looks better or worse. Yeah, I think I like it on top better. And I think I want to go just a little darker. Okay, and then one final step I want to do is if we zoom in here, you'll notice that this background has quite a lot of noise. And even she has quite a bit of noise. And our planet has no noise at all. And most of our flares don't have any noise at all. So that's kind of an indicator that this is a composite. And we want to sell the illusion that this is a photograph. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a constant film grain on top of the whole image. So to do that, I'm going to add a new layer, and we can call this film grain. And I want to fill this with a neutral gray. So let's click on our foreground color here. Let's get rid of hue, saturation, and make the brightness 50. Now if I fill, option delete to fill that layer, and if I put this on overlay, you'll notice when I turn it on and off that nothing happens, which is what I want. So now I can go to noise, add noise. Let's add 20, zoom in a bit here, and I want to blur this a bit. So let's go to Gaussian Blur, and looks like probably around 0.6. And then we can take the opacity of this down. Like so. It's Command 0 to fit in view, and I'm pretty happy with that.
So there you have it. That completes the composite and completes this tutorial. Now you will notice that I used a concrete texture in this tutorial, and that is part of my concrete textures pack, which I've included a link to in the description of this video. Now, if you enjoyed this tutorial, please subscribe to my channel, like the video, share it, leave a comment. All of it helps. All right, here are some tutorials for you to check out, and I will see you next time.